So for those of you who have never joined us before, my name is Christine McWilliam, and I work for the Alzheimer's Society of Alberta and Northwest Territories. With me tonight is my tech support, Jennifer Sims. She's from Grand Prairie. If you have any issues or need any assistance in the technology department, message her directly. So I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous people with their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home, and endeavor to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. And so, like I said, just a couple of housekeeping items. I think the main one for most people, which most people know now, is to keep yourself on mute, please. If you're not asking a question, we just want to be respectful of people who are talking or who have the floor, and just please bear that in mind. Just like to remind people we are open, but some of us are still working remotely. Some of our offices are open by appointment, different times of the week. So please just connect with your regional office should you need further services for tonight. As I kind of mentioned earlier, we do thank you for joining us. I realize this is an extremely busy time of year for people, so thank you for taking the time out of your evening to join us. So keep your eye out as well if you were informed about this Zoom meeting by email. It's one of many that's coming up for our winter lineup, and we hope to see you out in 2023. Just want to remind people as well, we are recording, and this will be available after on our Assant Cafe within usually the next day or two. Back to that little part about keeping yourself on mute. If you'd like to unmute yourself to ask a question, we're more than open for that this evening, but please use the raise your hand function or type something into the chat. You can also send a private message to myself or Jen, and we'll make sure that we get those dealt with in the order that they're received. We may not get to everyone's questions this evening, but we will follow up and make sure that they do get answered. Lastly, this is not medical advice, so please do not take anything that we mention this evening as medical advice. As always, please consult a medical professional for anything further on a question that you may have. So here are two presenters for the evening. Oh, the other thing I like to mention for us is, yes, here is our two presenters. You may or may not have seen this advertised on social media. We are social, so also please feel free to follow us on our 4 main platforms to keep up to date with all the society action. Right now, people living with dementia need support more than ever, and our services are free of charge. We're asking you to help more families receive support if you're able to. There will be an opportunity to donate at the end of this presentation. And as always, thank you for your continued support of the Society. All right, so now I will introduce both of our speakers for the evening. First off, we have Stephanie. Was first connected with the Alzheimer's Society as a student during her practicum hours as part of her learning in the social work program at MacEwan University. She then joined the team in the Edmonton office and has been with the organization for 7 years. In Stephanie's role as a navigator with client services, she facilitates support groups and runs education sessions, programs to help support families in their journey with dementia. Stephanie shares a personal connection as she was a care partner to her grandmother who lived with dementia. And next we have Jeannine Chemello. She is a retired psychiatric nurse with over 40 years of geriatric psychiatric experience and has worked with the Continuing Care Psychiatric Consulting Services since 1992. This team of nurses offers support and assistance to continuing care and support living facilities for concerns for all residents within their setting. She's been sharing her experiences and approaches and supports with the Alzheimer's Society for the past 20 years. And with all that being said, I am going to open the floor up. Maybe Steph and Jeannine, do you both maybe want to take another minute or two to just kind of give people a little more background of what you do within the society? Stephanie and Jeannine, you have since retired, but what your time was like at AHS in
past years.
And that might get people's brains moving on some questions to ask.
I can go first. As Christine said, my name is Stephanie. You may recognize me if you've been in the Edmonton office and attended a program, or you might even recognize me if you've gone to something online that I've facilitated. So my role at the Alzheimer's Society is really to help support families in learning more about dementia, understanding why we're seeing some of these changes, and really to help provide tips and strategies as you navigate the next steps, as you kind of navigate those changes in roles and relationships. So not only practical tips, but also supporting you through this journey. I know it can be not always an easy one. So we're here really to just answer questions, any questions that you have, really about anything. That's why we titled this webinar, Ask Us Truly Anything. If there's not a question we can answer right here in this moment on this platform, certainly Christine and Jennifer will make sure that we get those questions sent out to where they need to be, and you will get your answer. So there's no question you can't ask today. So start thinking about, if you're looking for a strategy about a certain situation, you have a question about kind of next steps, all of those are open to ask. I'll turn it over to Jeannine.
So a little bit more about myself. Well, yes, I just retired in October, but have 41 years of geriatric psychiatry experience, and the last 30 years working with the Continuing Care Psychiatric Consulting Services program really was an eye-opener for me regarding dementia and the challenges that people face when being a care provider for someone with dementia. And my role was to see clients in continuing care or supportive living facilities and help the staff and family with approaches, brainstorm on ways that would this, let's try this, maybe this will work, or let's try this approach and tweak this little bit, or those kind of things. So that's really what my expertise is. I've been volunteering with the Alzheimer's Society for, it's actually 23 years now. And I do a talk in the middle stage of dementia, and it's regarding responsive behaviors, and those are the challenges that care providers run into all the time. And recently got two in-laws with dementia and my mom with dementia, and I have a friend I walk with every day. She has in-laws with dementia, and we're talking constantly, and I'm giving her tips and things, try this, and then I think, well, I need to take my own advice, because when I'm dealing with my in-laws and my mom, I find I'm that care provider and nobody's listening to me, and it's all on me, and what do I do and where do I go? But yet I know those answers. I just need to take a breath, step back, and implement.
Well, and thank you both for sharing that. And like you had both echoed, you both definitely bring your own unique experience to tonight. We do already have two questions in the queue. Just so people do know, and maybe I'll get Jen, if you don't mind adding, Jeannine did a previous webinar for us, and it was on feelings of needs and expressions. And I know it's still personally one I share with folks because it's got a lot of great tips that she just mentioned. So yeah, we'll put that in the chat, and if people want to take a look at it after. So the first question is, my family has been trying to get a diagnosis for my mom for almost a year now. I'm wondering if it is normal for it to take so long.
Well, Stephanie, you or me?
Would you
You
like to
start.
go first?
You
Me first.
start.
Okay, this is gonna be an evening of you go. You go.
Yeah.
A diagnosis. So the main route that most families take is to go to their GP with concerns. That's usually the route that we recommend most families go, as most people do have a GP. And if you don't have a GP, I really encourage you, or your family member doesn't have a GP, to get one. Primary care is so important. When it comes to getting a diagnosis, sometimes a GP can certainly make a diagnosis of dementia, depending on their kind of where they're comfortable with, and sometimes a GP will refer on to a specialist. So that may be a geriatrician or a care of the elderly doctor that would work in usually a clinic of some kind. I know here in Edmonton there's quite a few different seniors clinics or geriatric clinics throughout the city. Now, that being said, for that confirmation from a specialist who may do some further kind of assessments and testing, we know there's a wait to get in to see a specialist. So oftentimes there is sometimes a few months, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer to get in to see a specialist. So we do see sometimes it taking a little bit longer in that sense, as well as a diagnosis of dementia can be a little bit more complex. For those of you who have gone through that process of having a family member diagnosed, we know there's not one test that says, yes, Stephanie is living with dementia, or no, she's not. So really it's a diagnosis of, I'd like to say a diagnosis of eliminating any other cause or reason that could be causing the changes that we're seeing. And so sometimes it does take some time to rule out other things that they want to look for. Sometimes they may want to do a scan of the brain, but not always needed. So we do sometimes see it take a little bit more time. Anything you wanted to add to that, Jeannine?
No, I think you've covered that very well, and you're very accurate. Anywhere from 2 months to a year to get in to see a specialist. So it's very individual.
Okay, moving along, they're coming in. So is it okay to ask for a care home to put a camera in my mom's room for us to keep an eye on her? It would just make me more comfortable. I've gotten emails talking about something called seed. Oh, sorry, this is a 3-part question. I've gotten emails talking about Seeds of Hope. Can you tell me what this is? And then my dad has been hallucinating. When I tell him there's nothing there, he just gets more angry. How can I help support him better to calm him down? So we want to start with the first part of the care home putting a camera in the person's room.
Well, I'll start there, Stephanie. As a family member, you have every right to put the camera in your family member's room, but you have to share that information. It's not a hidden camera. It needs to be advertised so all staff know that they are being recorded. And I know in all my years going into care facilities, many family members had put cameras in. And so have that conversation with the facility, let them know why you want it. It's not that you're there to spy on the staff. It's there to, so you can keep an eye on your family member and give you peace of mind that they're safe. So yes, you absolutely can.
Okay. Steph, did you have anything to add, or do you want to move on to Seeds of Hope?
No, I think like Jeannine said, you're absolutely in your right. Another thing I know, I remember one family member with the camera. It's kind of that double-edged sword where I like the being able to check in. I also had someone say, you know, I found myself, you know, consumed with the camera at the same time. So whatever's going to work for you, I say whatever makes you feel comfortable, is go with your gut, and if that's what you feel works for you, then absolutely, I would say go ahead and do that. The other question was about Seeds of Hope. So we run many programs. We offer webinars like this evening. Seeds of Hope is an education program that we offer families. We have, it's like taking a series, I guess you could say. So we have our early stage modules, our middle stage, late stage, and end of life. Each series is broken up into a few different sessions. So we bring in speakers to talk about dementia related topics, kind of pertinent to that stage. So, you know, in the early stage, we bring in the lawyer to speak in about powers of attorney and personal directives. And, you know, in middle stage, someone like we have Jeannine come in to talk about some of those changes that we see and managing that. So lots of great learning, lots of fantastic speakers. We will be offering this in person in certain regions, again, starting in the new year. So if you are in the Edmonton region, we will have a new round of sessions starting in the winter, spring. Contact your local Alzheimer's Society office to see if there is an in-person session happening in your region. As well, we do have a hybrid option as well with some of those in-person sessions. And of course, you can also go onto the Assant Cafe here and watch the Seeds of Hope as well, a recorded version of them. I highly encourage anyone to check out those series. Tons of great information.
Yeah, absolutely, with tons of great speakers like Jeannine. And the last part of the question was, my dad has been hallucinating. When I tell him there's nothing there, he just gets more angry. How can I help support him better to calm him down?
Well, I'll take a stab at this one. So hallucinations are not, I'll use that terrible word, normal, but there are some diagnoses and medications that hallucinations are common. So my first question would be, is this something new? Is it a true hallucination, or is it misinterpretation of the environment? So is it something that's happening in the evening versus all day long? Is it a sudden onset? One of my recommendations would be to have that investigated. First of all, pay attention to those things. And it might be keeping a journal. Okay, dad's hallucinating. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning. Is it, is the light, is it a misperception of what's happening in the environment? Never argue. You're going to lose no matter what you're arguing about, whether it's a hallucination or whether I need to have a bath. You're going to lose that argument. It's more therapeutic and effective to enter my reality. If I'm hallucinating and I'm distressed by what I'm hallucinating about, so if I've got people who are trying to kill me, that's stressful and that needs to be treated. But if I'm hallucinating about it's a beautiful sunny day and I'm at the beach and life is wonderful, it's not so much of an issue. So you have to look at when the hallucinations are happening. Is it consistently at a certain time? And are they traumatized by these hallucinations or not? So, having somebody who's hallucinating, that's a really tough question without knowing a whole bunch more details.
Okay. Next question, and once again, if people do want to open their mics, we can accommodate that tonight. Just please raise your hand. So the next question is there a website or a place where we can access that rates long-term care facilities that deal with Alzheimer's?
Yes, I'll take that question. The answer is yes and no, and also some extra information here about where we find this information and how do we decipher it. So there is the facility directory that's on Alberta Health website, where you can see the details of every care home in Alberta, from supportive living to long-term care. Many of these care homes often do a resident surveys and feedback. So people will give their score on how they feel, things are operating at certain facilities, and they kind of give that score out of, I believe it's 100. So you can absolutely go on to the site and see what this care home resident overall satisfaction was, and you can see all of their times that they've had visits to be inspected, and if they complied, and all of those things, because many of these every place is regulated and monitored. That being said, when you're looking at rating, and if you're using this to find a place for your family member or that person that you're supporting who lives with dementia, I always remember this one support group where it was 2 adult daughters, both had a mom in the exact same care facility, on the exact same floor, in the exact same unit. Both showed up to our support group. One adult daughter was happy with the care, couldn't say enough good things about it. It was a perfect place for her mom. The other adult daughter was actually on a waiting list to transition her mom to somewhere else because she was not happy, and it wasn't a good fit for her mom. So I always say, when you are going to look at places, as much as it's important that people comply to regulations and all of those things, when you're looking for somewhere for your family member, rate it based on how you feel when you go to see these places. So when you're going to make decisions about moving someone, and we have a lovely document that has a checklist of some things to look for, and you can find that on our website or on the Assant Cafe, of things to look for when you go into a care home. What should I be looking for? And I always say, yes, walls and flooring doesn't provide care. It's the people and the staff that provide good dementia care. So I always say, what does it feel like when I walk in there? And so I would base my decision more so on those individual visits to a place, rather than some of those scorings that you would see maybe on the facility directory.
Jeannine, did you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I just agree. It's more a feel. Don't go by the look of the building. Building might be the oldest place in the world, but have the best care in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and isn't that absolutely true? Okay. My mom doesn't have a formal diagnosis. Is there any reason why she would need a formal diagnosis?
Well, formal diagnosis helps with treatment. So there are medications that are used to slow the progression of the disease, but it does not stop it. And if it started early enough, it can give quality of life longer than without it. So do you have to have a diagnosis of dementia? Absolutely not. But it may help plan the treatment.
And the only thing I would, to add to what Jeannine said, absolutely, it's important to know so that we can plan for the future treatment, as well as there are sometimes things that can present with dementia, like symptoms that are not dementia as we age. So I think it's very important that people who are maybe concerned about their memory, that they pursue that diagnosis with either their GP or their specialist, so that we can put a name to these changes and plan for the future.
Okay. Your next question. My mom has been diagnosed by her doctor, including an assessment by the geriatric clinic with progressive dementia. The doctor notes that her cognitive capacity is inadequate to ensure decisions with financial matters and where she should live. That said, I do not believe she is at the point that she needs to be put into a care home, but who triggers when she would need to be placed in a care home?
Great
Definitely.
question. I will say that enacting those documents doesn't necessarily mean that somebody needs to move. Enacting those documents really gives the person that is named as that agent or decision maker the ability to make those decisions when the time comes. So what triggers somebody that they would need to be moved into a care facility? Well, that really depends on the person, the family, what's been going on. If everyone's situation is going to be different. So what was the reason for one person might not even be on the radar for another family as a reason for a move. So it's really about how is that person managing day to day. Do they live on their own? Do they live with a spouse? Do they have family around? Are they connected with home care? If they aren't, if they did connect with home care, would that keep them in their home a little bit longer? So there's many reasons that someone may move. When that is for each person, that's going to be a different time for everybody, because everybody is unique in their own situation. But if anyone has questions or wants to talk again after this webinar in a little bit more detail about that situation, we can certainly arrange that as well.
Hey, Stephanie.
Yes.
Yeah, can I just, I asked the question, would it be my decision with the POA as my mom's caregiver, or would it be a health nurse or someone like that would say, yes, she needs to go to that care facility? That's where I'm struggling with at this point, is when it gets to that point, can I make that decision, or does somebody else have to?
Oh, in terms of that access to a care facility, is that what you're saying, Wes? Like
Yeah, if they need, and I SL3 or 4, whatever it is, if they needed to go where there was magnetic locks on the doors because the disability got to the point that it would be unsafe for her, to wander outside by herself. How do I get her to that point? Can I just phone up the home care and say, hey, my mom needs to go, can we start the process? Or is there something else that needs to happen?
Does your mom currently have a case manager?
Yes, she does.
Okay. So the important thing is that the case manager needs to know if things have been changing for your mom. So that would certainly be a conversation I would have with them. And then a discussion of, I think it's time we start to look at maybe transitioning, because things just aren't working at home anymore. They may offer some more supports, or we might go down the road of let's start this process. So they would bring in somebody called a transition coordinator, who would then do an assessment to determine what level of care somebody is eligible for. Because here in Alberta, we have different levels of care in the continuing care system. So we don't get to decide where we feel our family member needs to live. That's done by an assessment by that transition coordinator, who would then kind of say, this is the level of care, and we go forward with the steps of picking a place.
Okay, nope, that helps. Thank you.
And if I can just add to that, so I'll share personal. My mom is a small town in Saskatchewan, has dementia, not coping, has no family there. And I'm on the phone daily with home care. Their resources are so limited. I have now made the decision that my mom is moving, and I am going to Saskatchewan tomorrow to get her to sign a piece of paper so that I can put an application in a larger facility. in a community because they just do not have those resources.
Thank you.
Hey, as I said, great conversation. Please feel free to keep asking away. We got lots of time left. So the next question is, and I think it might be a follow-up to an earlier comment. The problem with assessing care homes is that the conditions can change over time. My mom's care home was public when she moved, and then a year later it was privatized and eventually sold to yet another company. And with each change, there's been a decrease in quality of care.
That can, so it sounds like in this situation, if I'm correct, the operator of the facility changed. Would I be correct in saying that?
That's what it sounds like. If this person would like to open their mic, please feel free.
Yeah, sorry, that was just a follow-up to a discussion about how to assess a care home. I just wanted to point out that, okay, you may make an assessment, but there's no guarantee it's going to remain the same quality of care, unfortunately.
And you know, staffing changes. I know, for example, with my grandmother, she lived in a long-term care for many years, and was actually diagnosed with dementia a few years after she had moved into long-term care. So her admission to long-term care wasn't because of dementia, it was actually a broken hip. And so I can certainly say that sometimes things change, you know, even just based on staff. So, you know, sometimes, you know, the staff really worked well for us. But I think the important thing is advocating for your family member, advocating for their care. And if you are ever feeling like you're not being heard or needs are not being addressed appropriately, there's always places you can go to file a complaint or concern, and that it doesn't just kind of get swept under the rug and we forget about it. So if you ever have challenges with kind of working with the care home, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to help you in some next steps on where you can go and who you can talk to.
Okay, great. And there again, a really good point. Thanks, Laura, for opening up your mic. It's always nice to hear from the crowd as well. So the next question is, you talked about legal documents. We don't have any documents done up. What happens if my mom doesn't have capacity? What do we do now that we might have missed that opportunity?
Is that for me too? Okay, Jeannine's nodding. Okay. Yeah, so, and that's actually one of the reasons, if I think back to Seeds of Hope, why we bring in a lawyer to talk about those documents in our early stage series, because of that importance. We want people to have those documents done, and for people living with dementia to have a voice in planning for the future. That being said, that doesn't always happen. We don't always think about making those documents, and sometimes it's just hard to get them done. And by the time we get to a point where someone can no longer sign for a legal document, where do we go? The answer would be to apply for guardian and trusteeship through the courts, essentially. So if my mom was living with dementia and she can no longer sign, then I would have to apply to be her guardian and trustee. That would be granted to me after going through the courts. So it's not an impossible thing to do, but it is a lot more complicated than going and getting your documents done. So if you haven't had your documents done, not only for your family member who's living with dementia, but really everybody over the age of 18 should have those documents done. This is my message to you, or maybe a New Year's resolution coming up if you haven't done them, to get those documents done or updated. Sometimes we've done these documents years ago and we haven't updated them, and especially with spouses. So if there's any spouses on the call today, if you've done your documents, oftentimes spouses will name each other as their decision maker. If your spouse is now living with the dementia, we might want to look at updating some of those documents. So if my spouse is living with dementia, I may not want that person to be my decision maker, but I can still be theirs. Hope that answered the question.
Jeannine, did you have anything to add?
No, I say exactly what she said.
Yeah, and you're right, Stephanie. That is one of the society's soapboxes that we stand on, because it's just so important for instances like this. So, really great question. So based on your experience, what is the length of stay for a person once they enter long-term care to end of life?
Well, there is no time frame. It's very individual. Everything with any disease is individual. So I can't say you go into a care facility and 2 years later you pass away. It's very individual. And I know people with dementia who have moved into a facility and 5 years later are still plugging away, happy, content, and doing their thing. So individual, I can't even give you a guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I would echo what Jeannine said. That it's really hard to put numbers. I'm sure if we looked, there would probably be an average that someone has done if they've looked at kind of averaging of people moving in and to when somebody passes away. I don't have that information on hand, but again, we know that averages are just that it's not always an accurate picture of what's going to happen for our situation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I see someone did add into the chat that their mom's been in for 13 years. So I guess that just goes to, yeah, the saying, if you know one person, you know one person.
Exactly.
Bonnie, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to unmute?
Yeah, I just had a question that, like my dad has the early stages, I guess, mild cognitive or whatever. And so been trying to get him into a lodge, it's his choice though. So we're just waiting for him to decide. But when they get to the point where they have to go into a SL4D ward, like for funding, how does that work? Like, because on lodge side, I know it's government subsidized according to his income, but going into that SL4D side, is that something that, like, do they kick them out if they don't make enough money? Like, I don't know, because I've never really looked at the financial side of that.
Yeah. Is this one for me?
Do you understand what
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So when we think of care, and there's different levels. So if we're talking SL4D or long-term care, and for those of you, I'll stop trying to speak in acronyms here. SL4D is supportive living, level 4D for dementia, or designated supportive living. So those are the publicly funded spaces that are funded by Alberta Health. So with that, the cost for publicly funded spaces, give or take, I always just throw out the amount of around $2,000. That's the publicly funded cost per month for care for SL supportive living, designated and long-term care. Could be a little bit more, but we'll just use that as a round number. At the end of the day,
could I add something to that?
Yeah.
My husband has early onset dementia and he is in SL4D. And the rates went up drastically in November and it's now $2,202 or $4.
so about 2,200.
About 2,200.
Yeah. So around that number. And so the way it works is really at the end of the day, nobody is not going to get care because they can't afford it. So whether it be one of the provincial programs or the federal programs, so they'll look at is this person getting, you know, CPP, old age, guaranteed income supplements, the Alberta Seniors Benefit. So all of those programs will kind of talk to each other and make it work so that the person can access that publicly funded bed with having an extra, I want to say $100 or $200, maybe $300 for things like, you know, buying shampoo, or maybe I want the newspaper every day, getting haircuts, you know, doing things like that. So at the end of the day, nobody is going to be out of not being able to live in the level of care they need based off of their income. Now, if we're talking private, there are private SL4Ds around Alberta. And if you've got the money to spend for private, then you can absolutely go the private route and not have to go through the health system at all. But doesn't mean care is any better or worse in public versus privately accessed care homes. And oftentimes, Bonnie Lou, the social worker, great resource, whether somebody is in hospital waiting or the social worker at the care home is often a great resource, who is usually very well versed in making sure all of the forms are filled out and is the person accessing all of the income supports that they should be getting.
Can I ask a secondary question to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly.
Okay. It's my spouse who has dementia. Still, I don't know, early to mid. I don't know where he's at. It's probably been a few years. When you were talking about the financial cost for the care, if they have to go into a level 4, and I mean, I'm hoping to keep him at home as long as I possibly can with support through healthcare and Veterans Affairs, et cetera. And I did talk a little bit to the lawyer, but you were saying CPP, old age. Do they also consider his pensions towards the cost of the care? I know the lawyer said, like when we went to the lawyer, because we went, and we've always had power of attorney and stuff in effect. I'm kind of anal about those things. She said that he would be assigned like a financial advisor, and we'd have to do an involuntary separation, which kind of breaks my heart. Would they also, if we happen to make it 6 years, I'll be 65 in 6 years, like I've got a ways to go. Would they also take my income into account? I guess it's like, how am I going to live when we're not living together?
Yeah.
You know, for me, there's that fear that, you know, do they take all his pension? Do they take all his CPP? Do they take it all, or do they leave some for the spouse? Like, how does that work?
And when with this situation a little bit different because of a young onset, right? Your spouse is under the age of 65, or?
No, he is actually, he just turned 68, but it probably started, I'm going to say 3 years ago at least, but he was diagnosed a year ago. But I kind of started to suspect, but it took us a year to get in for an assessment.
Yeah, I'll have to look into a few things, but for those of you who Lynn had used a term called it involuntary separation, which I'm glad they've actually changed the name to statement of common spouses and common law partners living separately for reasons beyond their control. It's a much longer statement, but I think it much better describes the situation, right? So what that essentially does is, instead of looking at a couple's income together, they would look at it as separate, so in the eyes of the government as single, and so that may qualify somebody to be bumped up in certain programs, whether it be provincial or federally. So the idea is that if a couple has to live apart and someone has to move into care, that we access this where someone would still be able to manage at home while their partner or spouse is now living in long-term care or an SL4D. The logistics, Lynn, of the pensions thing, I don't have that off the top of my head, but if you do reach out to our office, we'll make sure we do a little bit more digging for you and answer some of those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Lynn, my husband did not have enough money, but I had a pension through work. So we got the involuntary separation, and it's not a separation, it's just your finances are separated. Just think of it that way. It's your finances that are separated. But my husband comes up short every month. And so I have to contribute the extra money that he is short. But if your husband does he have a pension through the vets?
Yes, he has a military pension and another small pension. And my concern is, what am I going to live on? I'm only 50. I had planned on working another 5 years, but because of his diagnosis and we relocated back to Alberta 3 years ago, I decided we'll live on what he makes, because I want to spend as much time as possible while we can. So I don't have an income. So my concern is a realistic concern is, will I, be given at least half of his pension and his income, or is that all going to go to his care and then I'm left, living on the street?
They will only take the $2,200. They won't take all of his money. It's just the $2,200. So anything that's left over after that, you get.
Well, that doesn't leave me much.
No. You might qualify for AISH. I don't know.
Pardon?
Would you qualify for AISH?
I don't know.
Give our office a call, Lynn.
Okay.
And we can certainly kind of walk through the next steps.
Okay.
It's a bit more of a unique situation, especially when we're kind of on that line of young onset. So things can get a little bit more complicated, certainly.
Yeah, definitely. And if you two would like to connect offline, please let us know how we could support that as well. It's always nice when you find someone else with just that much extra information to share. So we would be happy to facilitate that if that's something of interest. I guess, yes, of course, it never fails. There's always questions just keep rolling in, which is great. And I just want to try and get to a few more of them before just to keep being cognizant of everyone's time. So the next question, geez, now I've lost my spot. Here we go. As my supports are minimal caring for my mom, if I need to hire someone to assist, where can a trusting and caring person be found? Or are there any volunteers who are available to assist? If so, where would I access this?
And from my understanding of this question, the person who asked this wants to go the private route. Was that my underreading?
It sounds more like maybe a companion service.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's how I read that. What I heard you say was a companion. And that is, you just have to find that on your own. Unfortunately, there are no designated services that have that. I know a lot of facilities have places that they will call. There's one called, I think, Angels, the Nurse Next Door. So there's a couple of places, and I think the seniors, there's a booklet, the SAGE booklet that's out. I think in there may be some companions for hire in there, and sometimes it's just word of mouth.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure who asked the question, but if you want to chat more offline, absolutely. with hiring a companion, lots of people will supplement supports from home care and kind of top them up or bump them up with some private services. So that would be hiring from an agency. There's many private agencies throughout Alberta that offer services like home care services and companionship. So absolutely happy to chat to anyone about that offline and kind of talk about some strategies of where to look for. I can't recommend one place over the other. It's similar to that care home question of, sometimes people ask, what would you choose, or what would you say is the best care home in Edmonton? And I can't answer that because everybody's experience is different. So you got to go with that gut feeling. But certainly you can look at private companionship, but I would also encourage families, if you are needing some support, to reach out to home care and to get a case manager to come out and do an assessment.
Okay. These questions are probably the first one's probably for Jeannine, and the next one's probably for Stephanie. So my mom is moving into a care home, and I'm wondering, is there a maximum or minimum time I'm supposed to be visiting? Right now, I am just so tired.
There is absolutely no maximum or minimum, but you have to look after you. You have to look after your own mental health, because if you don't look after you, you're not going to be there for your mom at all. And if she's just moving into a facility, now might be a really good chance for you to take a break and just take a breather, visit maybe once a week, just to give yourself a chance to recoup and get back on your feet, kind of thing. But there is no magic number. You should be there every day. You do what works for you, and you need to know and believe that your family member is now safe. They are looked after, they are safe, somebody is caring for them. It doesn't fall on you now 24/7. You have those supports, use them.
And the next one was, while I was looking for a care home, I was told there is something called butterfly homes. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the butterfly care model, something that was developed by Dr. David Sheard out in the UK. He had a company that was called Dementia Care Matters. I believe now might be called Meaningful Care Matters. So there's been a little bit of a switch over there. But essentially what it was is just looking at the way we think about dementia care, what caring for people living with dementia could look like, what could we do differently. And so it really was focused on being person-centered. And I know Jeannine talks a lot about this, is, not really looking at people as having behaviors, but people expressing feelings and needs. So looking at a different approach to how we support people. So there are a few care homes in Alberta. I think there's 5 of them. There's 3 here in Edmonton, I think 2 down in Calgary and somewhere else in the south, I believe. So they've gone through this accrediting of being a butterfly accredited care home through that program. And really it's about an approach. So it's focusing on meaningful activities, not seeing people as having behaviors, but expressing a feeling, an unmet need. It's about filling people's days with purpose and mattering. So it's a little bit different than the traditional way that we've always thought about dementia, which is treating the symptom and managing and bringing that person back to, our reality and orienting. So it's kind of doing the opposite of what the medically and historically we've done to people living with dementia. Actually, if you are interested, our very first webinar that we ever hosted on the Assant Cafe back in 2015, I believe it was, is actually from David Sheard, doing a talk about that very model. So if you're interested, I encourage you to scroll back through the many webinars we've had and take a look. He does a much better explanation as explaining to what it is than I did in that short few sentences.
Well, we've also come a long way in our webinar offerings, so I would ask that you bear that in mind.
I did watch it recently, Christine. It's lovely.
So you have 3 questions left. I'm just seeing the time. I think we probably should be able to get to them. But if people still have questions after the final one, please send them in. We are keeping track of them, and we can definitely get back to you when this has been, or when this is completed. So the first one is, I've started caring for my sister and she lives in her own home alone. I'm starting to worry that she will leave her house and become lost. Is there tips?
Many. And that's always a fearful time, that your family member is going to wander outside, and it's cold outside right now, so there's even more risk. So I know the Alzheimer's Society has a Safely Home program, and I always allude to it, but I let the society do the talk about it because I don't know all those lovely details. But some of the things that I've suggested to family members is even never lock them in the house. They always need to be able to get out. You need to be able to get in. But even one of the little hook and eye locks at the top of the door, just so that when they try to open the door, they can't get it open. An alarm on the door so that if they do open it, you hear it. That's always a good thing to have. And I know in our house, we have a security system, and it's still, to this day, our kids are growing up, but it still beeps every time you open the door. I like to know that. I like somebody's either coming in or coming out, and if nobody shows up, then I need to go look. I need to be investigating. So that's another option, is to think about some kind of alarm on your door. In facilities, exit doors are often disguised. They're painted as, you know, a bookshelf or a garden scene or something. So there may be options that you can do like that to distract from the door. Or possibly taking your sister out for a walk with you every day. Is that enough to get her out, that she's no longer trying to get out the door, or you're worrying about wandering? And if wandering is an issue, like wandering is such a broad term. So is she wandering because she's looking for something, or is she wandering because she wants to go outside? Is she wandering because she needs to go to the washroom? She needs to, she wants something to eat. She can't find the comfortable chair, or, you know, her back is sore. There's so many things. So you have to sit back and think, what exactly is the issue? Is it wandering and going to go outside? Or is it, I'm wandering in my house looking for something, and now as a detective, I have to figure out what my family member wants? But I would highly recommend that you check into the Safely Home program.
Sorry, Steph, I wasn't too sure if you had anything else to add.
No, I think, like, and as Jeannine said, we talk about, you know, everything that someone living with dementia does has a meaning and purpose. So sometimes it's finding, like Jeannine said, what is the reason for wanting to leave? Is it boredom, like Jeannine said? So I think sometimes we put on our detective hat and try and listen with our dementia listening ears to what is the reason behind and I'm going to use air quotes around the word behaviors. What is the reason for this? And certainly looking into maybe getting a medical alert bracelet, or some families will also look at doing a GPS, which can be helpful for some families, but again, not a 100% fail-proof solution. They can certainly work well in some situations, but also the GPS needs to be with the person in order for it to be effective. So it can promote some level of independence as well for someone living with dementia, while maintaining safety. But lots of different options to think about, and a lot of some of these scenarios require a conversation so we can get a little bit more information about the situation and what's happening to come up with a little bit more detailed solutions. So do definitely reach out to us.
Mhm. Right. Okay, second to last question. Does anyone know how much it would cost to go private on average? So going back to the care topic.
So if we look at publicly funded care, and when we think of care, again, I'm talking about like an SL4D or long-term care where you've been assessed to move in by a transition coordinator, at about $2,200 a month. Private, on average, I would say at least double that. So I've seen anywhere from 5,500, 6,000 up to 10,000 plus a month for some places. So the cost can go quite high for private care.
Well, and a lot of it can just add, every service adds
Yeah.
dollar amount.
Yes.
Okay, and the last question, like I said, if people still feel free to put anything extra into the chat, but our last question, I was referred to the society through my doctor. My friend is worried her husband is losing his memory. Does she need to have a doctor referral to get support from the society?
Absolutely not. Please call us. We are happy to support people who are in the process of getting a diagnosis, looking for some guidance on that. So you do not need to be directly referred to us. Many people are, but you can just give our office a call. I know Jennifer has put our toll-free number in there. So just give our office a call and we will get you connected to somebody, and you have absolutely the same access to our program supports and services as somebody who was directly referred to us. So please pass on that phone number to your friend.
And just to let everyone else know, there were a few other people who did direct messages in the chat. Just please note we will get to those after, and we will be in touch in one way or another. Jeannine, did you have any closing remarks?
No, I just thank you, Stephanie, because they were your questions, not mine. They were way out of my wheelhouse, those ones. So no, I have nothing other than continue to reach out to the Alzheimer's Society for supports. And it's the best resource out there, trust me.
Stephanie, any closing remarks on your end?
Great questions, everyone. Again, we're here to support you in any way we can, so please do not hesitate to reach out to us at any time. We are well connected to many fantastic supports out to the community, like our Jeannines out there who are happy to answer questions for us. So please reach out to us, and thank you for all the great questions. And I get so much learning from you as well, just hearing your stories. So thank you for sharing those with me tonight.
Mm-hmm. Well, and yes, there again, as always, we do have everything in the chat, so we've marked all that down. The recording will be available, I would say tomorrow, very likely. If you'd like to review any of this, share any of this, please keep an eye on your emails for our winter ones coming up. We do have one on sleep and memory in January, which sounds very interesting. So as we said, always feel free to reach out, and I hope everyone has a great holiday season and a great start to 2023.